When I lived in the Philippines over a decade ago, I was attacked by a Manananggal. What is a Manananggal, you ask? It is the scariest of all Filipino monsters, the kind that scares all. And now, I will tell you my tale. When I was a teenager, I fell in love with a man, and we came very close as one might imagine to one another, and one thing led to another, and I became pregnant. My family is a devout Roman Catholic family, and would not accept a pregnancy outside of wedlock. My father was angry, so very, very angry. I had never seen him that angry before in my life. He screamed at me and told me that I was a fool, and that I was an embarrassment to the family. And with that, I was cast out of my home. My family disowned me. Suddenly, I was all alone. There was no one to turn to, nowhere to go. So the only option I had was to go to the home of my boyfriend and ask them to take me in. This didn't go well. His mother attacked me with a large knife and sliced my stomach. She tried to kill the unborn baby in my belly. I fled from their home and ran into the jungle. I wandered through it for days, feeling hungry and scared. Eventually, I came by an old woman. She was sitting by a river. She looked at me as I approached, sniffing the air like a dog, and then she asked, "Are you okay? You look hungry. Come with me, and I'll give you some food." Nodding at her, she got to her feet and motioned for me to follow her. We walked for an hour until I reached a small, humble house made out of bamboo and nipa. Nipa is the traditional leaves that we put on the roof of our homes. We entered the hut. She motioned for me to sit down on a chair, and she disappeared for a few minutes, returning with a bowl of soup mixed with rice. Smelling the food had a strange odour that I did not recognise. I asked the old lady what the meat was, and she cackled and replied, "Baby pork." I was so hungry I ate it without thinking too much about it. I noticed the old woman was not eating. After I finished, I asked the old lady why she didn't eat with me, and she muttered under her breath that she would eat later. I stayed with the old lady for a few months, and as my belly got bigger, she was always around me, staring at my stomach. In all this time, I never, ever, ever saw her eat. One night I awoke and felt a sharp pain in my stomach, and my first thought was, "Oh my God, I'm losing the baby." The pain was so intense, but I felt like I could not move. I wanted to scream, but I could not make a sound. In the silent night air, I could hear the slithering sound and moaning, like someone was enjoying a good meal. Something was wrong, but I couldn't do anything at all. I was scared, and I could feel my belly was starting to feel empty. Eventually, I passed out from the pain. The next morning, I awoke to blood all over my stomach and between my legs. I lost the baby. The old woman was not in the house when I awoke. I wanted someone to talk to, but I could not find her. Eventually, the old woman came home, and when she entered the home, she looked at me in disgust. She told me I had to leave. I told her that I lost the baby, and with a sick smile, she said, "I know." I managed to convince the old lady to let me stay one more day. I felt weak and tired and exhausted from losing the baby. That night I went to sleep. I do not know what time it was when I awoke, but once again, I could not move. I was laying in the bed, paralysed. But this time, the old lady was over the top of me. She looked down and she laughed. "I ate your baby last night. It was delicious. Now, you wretch, I'm going to curse you to live my life." With that, her hand grabbed my jaw and forced my mouth open. Looking at me, she laughed one more time before opening her mouth. Her teeth, oh my God, her teeth. They were long, sharp, like razor blades, and a long tongue rolled out of her mouth. And then I saw it. She had a black baby chicken in her mouth. Leaning forward, she put her mouth against mine, and the black chick went into my mouth. I felt like I was choking. My eyes opened wide as I realized what she was and what she was doing to me. The old woman was a Manananggal, a vampire, and she was passing on her curse to me. They feed their victims the black chick that lives inside their body, and that passes their curse on to their prey. I now knew I was doomed to become a beast like her. When I awoke the next morning, the old woman was gone, and the light from the outside was burning my eyes. I knew I had to avoid it at all costs. I felt so strong, like I could do anything, not like the day before when I was a weak, miserable person. Maybe the old lady did me a favour, as this would give me the opportunity to get revenge. It took me a few months to learn how to use the gifts the old lady gave me, and the hunger I now felt could not be satisfied by eating traditional foods. If food was cooked, it made me feel violently ill. I was forced to eat raw meat, but I found this was not satisfying anymore, and my hunger, but I knew the perfect thing that would satisfy me. The distance back to my hometown was not far. It would take me one night of travel, and there was someone I needed to visit. I saw him. He was walking with a young girl. They looked so very happy as they walked through the village hand in hand. Their happiness would not last long. He had discarded me and our baby so he could sleep around with this whore. I waited until the next night when I knew that he would be by himself. And then I laid my trap. Using the gifts the old lady gave me, I was able to tweak how I looked and change the length of my hair, the shape of my eyes, my nose, my lips, my chin. I no longer looked like the girl he knew. I approached him as he walked home and pretended to fall over and twist my ankle. He ran over to help me. He had fallen into my trap. As he helped me up, I asked him if he could take me home. I leaned on his shoulder as I limped. We chatted a bit, and I worked my seduction on him, and soon he was eating out the palm of my hand. When we arrived back at my home, and I said thank you to him, I'd give him a drink to reward him for his behaviour. So I poured him a drink and sat down beside him. I sat down beside him and innocently brushed his leg and smiled. He leaned over and kissed me on the lips, so I returned the kiss before pushing him down onto the ground. As we kissed, I felt my fingers run across his stomach and pressed down hard. His muffled screams sounded against my mouth. Now it was time. I pushed my fingernails into his stomach and I felt the warmth of the blood flow out against my palms. His eyes opened widely. There was fear in them. I broke the kiss and smiled. Do you remember me now? Do you remember? This is for our baby. And with that, I thrust my hands into his stomach and started to pull out his organs. Bringing them to my mouth, I bit into his soft flesh. It tasted delicious. I had never tasted anything that good before. I ate and ate until I had my fill. I do not know how long it was until he died. I don't care. It just tasted delicious. After I finished eating his stomach, heart, liver, I felt happy and content. I knew that I wouldn't have to eat for some time, but I knew next time I was hungry, there was already a meal waiting for me. I smelt it when he was walking with that whore. She had a nice, delicious snack growing inside, that was growing there just for me. This is a story from when I was a boy. My home is in a remote part of the Philippines, in some of the most mountainous regions in the land. My father died when I was 10 years old. He suffered a massive heart attack early in the morning. As per the tradition, we kept his body in our family home for a grieving period of 1 week. During this time, when I'd be sent to the shop to go and get food or rice, I would see a strange man in the distance. He always seemed to be lurking near the trees. He had extremely long arms and legs, which just didn't seem natural to me at the time, and his skin was pale white, almost like a corpse. This man was always lurking near our house, just by the banana trees, and whenever I would see him, he would duck away and disappear from view. But I could always feel his sinister presence, staring at our house. After the mourning period, we took my father's body to the cemetery for burial. The priest started the service, and suddenly, I felt strange. I couldn't think straight. My body started to feel numb, and it was like time started to slow down. Like I was covered in slime and I couldn't move. It was very bizarre. My mind started to become fuzzy, and I couldn't understand what the priest was saying. It sounded like his voice was slurred and he was speaking really slowly. The hairs on my arms started to stand up, and I felt something ominous, almost like there was a strange beast nearby that was really, really hungry. Looking up from my father's coffin towards the banana trees in the distance, I saw that man again, but this time he didn't hide. He seemed to stare at me, trying to show me his intent. I could now make out his features. He had stringy grey hair that seemed to be falling out. It was long and matted, and just looked like it hadn't been washed in many years. His jaw looked deformed, almost like it evolved to, I don't know, maybe have longer teeth than what you'd expect for a normal person. Or perhaps they were fangs. The man's eyes, they held mine. I couldn't look away from him. His eyes were bright red. There was no white in there, just red. I felt a hand on my shoulder, and this snapped me out of his trance. I turned away and I started to vomit violently. My eldest brother came to me to see if I was alright. He asked me if I was alright, and in a panic I asked him if he saw the man in the trees. He looked out at the trees for a few minutes and then said no, he didn't see the man there. After the funeral, we went home to mourn, and gathering my strength, I told my mother about the strange man. She didn't react the way I expected. She scolded me, telling me that I was all making up for attention, and she sent me to mine and my brother's room. I know what I saw, but no one would believe me. It was time to go out and get proof, so I snuck out the window and I started running towards the cemetery. When I arrived, I started to make my way to my father's gravesite, weaving out of the old tombstones, trying to avoid being seen. I was determined to see if I could find this man. As I saw my father's grave, that feeling washed back over me again, and everything seemed to slow down. I could hear scratching, like something sharp on wood. It was frenzied. It was a frenzied sound, and it seemed like an animal desperate to get some food hidden from it. The soil around the grave was gone. I crept up and peered over the edge, and then I saw the man. Or should I say, I saw the beast. Its hands had elongated fingers that were thin and bony. They looked like they didn't have any flesh on them at all. They just looked like bone. And from the tips of them protruded long, black fingernails. They looked sharp like razors. It was tearing at the lid of my father's coffin, shards of wood being torn off in quick succession. As the lid came off, the beast howled a howl of delight, and it let out a horrifying cackle as it started to rip at my father's funeral clothes. The beast tore off a chunk of my father, and it threw it in its mouth. I noticed its jaw opened unnaturally. It sounded like its jaw was breaking or dislocating as it threw another piece of my father in its mouth. There was a loud scream that broke the night in two. The beast turned its head to the source of the scream, and it looked directly at me. Its long tongue licked the blood off its face, and it smiled. I've never seen anything so terrifying in my life. I turned and I ran. and I ran as fast as my legs would carry me. The dead leaves cracked underneath my feet. No matter how hard I tried to run faster, it felt like I was running through a pool of water, wading through it, like I was waist deep in it. Once I reached the cemetery gate, suddenly that oppressive feeling was lifted, and I felt like I could move faster again. I ran as fast as I could until I got home. When I went back inside, I was crying, the tears streaming down my cheeks, and my brother asked me what happened, so I told him. He said something about being the man of the house, and he grabbed the machete, and he started heading towards the cemetery. He returned home about an hour later. His face was blank and white, and when I asked him, he told me in a very quiet voice, never to speak of this again. But I was young and stupid, so I insisted. I asked again. He turned, he looked at me, rose his hand, and he slapped me. I could taste the blood in my mouth, and he repeated, "Do not mention this again." It was about 15 years later. We all returned home from all over the country. It was time to celebrate. My sister was getting married. It was a lovely ceremony, and my brother and I had a little bit too much to drink. And as we sat outside talking about life and other such things, maybe it was the alcohol, but I gave it up the strength, and I asked him once again about our father's funeral. He sat there for a moment, stared off in the distance, and what he said next chilled me to the very bone. He said, "That night when I went to the cemetery, I saw it. It was a Bal-Bal. I saw it dragging our father into the forest. I still remember it like it was yesterday. The grave was open, and the Bal-Bal, it had left the banana tree in the coffin. I saw it inside the coffin, where our father should have been. There was a banana tree. The next day, I went back to our father's grave, and it was all covered back up again, like nothing had ever been disturbed. And since then, I've never gone back to father's grave. He's not there anymore." And with that, he turned to me and said, "Never speak of the Bal-Bal again, or it will come back, and it will kill us all." He got up, walked inside, leaving me in the darkness, and to this day, I have never spoken about the Bal-Bal. Hey, it's Mike here. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this content. If you did, please like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you want to hear more dark, scary stories from Asia, please let me know in the comments down below. Also, if you have any scary stories of your own, please email me down below, and maybe your stories may appear on the channel. Remember, keep watching for what's in the dark.